Welcome to Read 536. This is the screencast that explains the final part of your triangulated analysis assignment. For this part of the assignment, we're focusing on the California Common Core state standards and analyzing your program for their readiness to cover them. Alright, so we're going to have two different screencasts here because the assignment's going to be a little bit different depending on your doing yours on a K-12 program or you're doing yours on a community college program. So for K-12, you're going to need two things. You're going to need the SCOE crosswalk, so the Sacramento County Office of Education crosswalk document, which you can find on our Titanium website. The crosswalk essentially takes all of the old California English Language Arts standards and then examines them against the proposed California Common Core state standards, tells us in one document whether they are aligned, and then gives us some idea if they are not aligned or partially aligned, things that we need to consider. And then at the end of the document for each grade, what it does is it gives us a listing of all of the standards that are in the Common Core standards that were not part of the California English Language Arts standards. So it gives you an idea of things that you're going to have to add to your curriculum. And then you're going to need your program teacher's edition, so whatever program you've been using this far. If you're in the community college, you need to have a few things. So you need some type of standards or guidelines that you use to develop your syllabus or design how you're going to implement the program that you're working with. So if you're currently teaching in the community college, you can use whatever standards are set forth by your particular department, by a national organization, by the college itself. An example for myself would be that we use the standards set forth by CTC for graduate education, and then we also use the standards designed by the International Reading Association that applies specifically to the preparation of reading specialists. And we divide these up amongst our courses, and then let's say for 536, if you look at your syllabus, I have a particular set of standards that I need to cover in 536, and then I select my readings and I design my assignments to meet these standards. So I know that you might not have that type of parity in the community college class or program you teach in, but I'm going to ask you to use whatever it is that you use to design your program. If you are not in the community college, I'm going to ask that look at the program you're examining. Are there any guidelines or standards in that front matter or appendix sections of the materials that you're using? Perhaps you can use those. Other than that, I'm trying to get my hands on maybe some standards that you could apply to what you're examining. So your part of this assignment is going to be a little different than the K-12. And then you'll need whatever it is that you're calling your program. So I know there's a couple of you who are just looking at a syllabus and who have interviewed people that currently teach at the community college to get a better idea of how they designed it and how they chose particular activities and assignments for your literacy focus. And then if you have a teacher's edition, because I know some of you do, I know a few of you teach like from my handbook for ESL or a handbook on reading skills. So whatever teacher's edition or program materials that you use. So you may have either of these. But the rest of this screencast is going to deal with the requirements for the K-12 folks. So I'm going to focus on the Common Core, and then I will have another screencast designed for the community college track folks. Alright, so let's talk about where we start for K-12. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to familiarize yourself with this crosswalks document for the grade level that your program is designed for. So if your program spans a couple of different grade levels, see if you could just choose one level to focus on that makes sense. I know a couple of you are doing intervention programs, and they do the groupings a little bit differently. Some of them correspond to actual grades, and some of them correspond more to levels of reading. So look at the types of students you serve, the grades they're in, and the grades they generally come to you at, and see if you can figure out just one grade span to focus on. Even if you cover, let's say grades 3 and 4 and 5, or 3 and 4, or 2 and 3 and 4, just focus on one, because we're only going to focus on a few standards for this assignment. So the crosswalk document, let me pull it up. Oh no, we're going to be too small here. Okay, give me 1 second to fix this. Okay, well, my screen is going to be too small. I didn't realize that. I'm sorry. But basically, this is what it looks like. So it gives you the strand, right, the domain of reading here. It gives you the old California English Language Arts Standard. And then it aligns it with what they call the domain strand, or they call it core strand, in the Common Core standards. So you'll notice, like, they called it vocabulary for the California ELA standards. Now they're calling it part of the language standards. And then it tells you the corresponding Common Core standard and whether or not it's aligned. So, for example, and I'll go into this in more detail, but if this is 3rd grade, let's have vocabulary, knowledge of antonyms, synonyms, homophones. This is a standard that you're familiar with if you teach 3rd grade and other grades as a vocabulary standard. It doesn't have a direct correlation in the Common Core state standard, but if you go ahead and you read these, you'll find that it's included kind of in or implied in standard 4 for grade 3. Oh no, I'm sorry. Let me move this. So the other thing that it then does is, let's move it around. All right, so it gives you some comments, right? So it's not in the 3rd grade, specifically or explicitly in the 3rd grade standard here. It is aligned, but they covered it in 4th and 5th grade. So whereas in the California state standards, we covered this in depth and explicitly in grades 3, they don't get to it in depth and explicitly until grades 4 and 5 in the Common Core. But if you go ahead and you read the rest of standard 4, you see that it's implied. But that would have, that would be significant, and we'll talk about why a little bit later in this screencast. All right, so let's go back to our PowerPoint. All right, so the first thing you want to do is you just want to read that whole document for your grade level. So it's, it's first section is K, then it's grade 1, then it's grade 2, so on and so forth. So just go to your grade level and take a look at it. Just read it. Then you want to look at it for the standards that address your particular area of literacy. So you'll notice that what I would do is I would focus on that first domain column, because that addresses kind of what we've always called it in the California ELA standards. So like if I was doing vocabulary, I would look for all of the standards that talk about vocabulary. So if you have a focus area such as comprehension or writing, which have lots of standards, you're going to narrow that focus to just a few standards. So what you're going to do is you're going to look, and all of us are going to do this, but I think it makes sense to do this example for comprehension and writing because they have so many standards. You're going to just look at one unit. So you'll see later in my example, I only looked at unit 1, week 4. So you're just going to pick, if your program kind of lays itself out like this, 1 week in that unit to look at. If your program, isn't Open Chord or Treasures or HM, just look at whatever it is that you call a unit, and make it a small chunk, so a week or 2 weeks, whatever it takes to cover that piece. I wouldn't really look at anything that spans more than 2 weeks, because that's just going to be a lot for you to process right now. And the idea is not for this to be, absolutely comprehensive, but for you to get the idea and the practice with applying this type of analysis, because this is the type of thing that we're all going to be doing in the next couple of years when we're looking at the Common Core standards, and we've realized that they're not ordering us new programs, and we're going to have to figure out how we address this. So you're just going to then select the standards that relate to that unit, but go ahead for now, read the standards that are for your particular strand of literacy. And then go to the end of the section for your grade and look at the reference that they made for the standards that are not addressed in our previous standards. So let me give you my example here. So they all look like this. Okay, so it may not be really that we don't address them, but it's that they're not addressed also in that particular grade level. So every grade has a section that looks like this, and it will say Common Core Standard is not found in whatever grade California English Language Arts Standard. So the one thing I'll say is you can't really just look down core strand to find your area of literacy, because the names have changed. So we went by in the California standards, the domains of reading, and now they're calling it core strand, so they don't always correspond. Vocabulary is a good example. We specifically call it the vocabulary standards in the California ELA document, but then it's just under language in the Common Core state standards. So you want to actually read these to find the ones that apply. And you'll see, so all of these standards now are in the 3rd grade Common Core, so I'm going to have to cover these. So this is important for me to know, because they are probably not covered explicitly in my reading language arts program that's been, especially if it's been designed around the California English Language Arts Standards. And then you can read more, and it will tell you if it's, it wasn't found at all in our standards or where it was covered. So this is important to know, because like, let's say I'm doing 3rd grade, right? So this particular standard, compare and contrast themes, settings, plots of stories, was covered explicitly when these students were in 2nd grade, but now they're in 3rd grade. It's not probably going to be in my old open core program in any significant way, because it was designed around the California ELA standards. So since my students are going to be tested on and expected to know this in 3rd grade, even though they were taught it in 2nd, I'm going to have to include it in 3rd grade. Here it's kind of the other way around, is that we didn't address it in our old standards till 4th grade, but the students are now in the Common Core going to be responsible for learning this in 3rd grade, so it is not going to be in my program likely, so I am going to have to make sure that I include this. So this is a really useful and important piece, and what's so great is that it's already done for us, and you can get this off the SCOE site, but like I said, I put it on our Titanium site. All right. So this is just to familiarize yourself. So you're going to do these 3 things. You're going to read over this document so that you've gone through it at least once and you have kind of a good idea of how it's laid out, what they talk about in terms of the standards that you are most interested in, and then you can actually start doing your analysis. So I'm going to end this screencast here and pick up on the next one.